Good morning. Thank you all so much for being here this morning. It's good to be together. A warm welcome to all the family members and friends of the graduates, to my colleagues on the faculty, to Ms. Nachman, our school board chair, and most especially to this year's senior class. Welcome. Like some of you, I've been hurting these past 2 weeks following the death of our poet, Maya Angelou. I've spent a few too many nights staying up a few hours too late, watching YouTube clip after YouTube clip of her reading and speaking. I just found myself needing to hear that voice one more time. And if you don't know that voice I'm talking about, then I would say it might be worth your while to listen to some of those clips tonight for homework. It's worth losing some sleep over, if need be. I would like to bring that voice here this morning, and oh, that I could. And instead, I would like to open our ceremony today with just a few lines from one of her poems. It's one of her poems about mourning and about hope, which of course is where we find ourselves right now on this hopeful morning. From Maya Angelou, lift up your faces. You have a piercing need for this bright morning dawning for you. History, despite its wrenching pain, cannot be unlived, and if faced with courage, need not be lived again. Lift up your eyes upon the day breaking for you. Give birth again to the dream. Women, children, men, take it into the palms of your hands. Mold it into the shape of your most private need. Sculpt it into the image of your most public self. Lift up your hearts. Each new hour holds new chances for new beginnings. Do not be wedded forever to fear, yoked eternally to brutishness. The horizon leans forward, offering you space to place new steps of change. Here on the pulse of this fine day, you may have the courage to look up and out. Here on the pulse of this new day, you may have the grace to look up and out and into your sister's eyes, into your brother's face, and say simply, very simply, with hope, good morning. It does feel like a small miracle to arrive at this fine day, a small miracle. That some of your family members have traveled this far to make this ceremony, that you graduates have traveled this far in your education to make this ceremony, that folks have worked so hard to transform a sweaty gymnasium into a space befitting your graduation, that the air conditioning for that sweaty gymnasium broke just yesterday, and Jim Malone was able to patch it. That your parents, who once held you in their arms and fed you and bathed you, that they have stayed by you. It's all a miracle by which we arrive at this fine morning. In the spirit of that miracle, I'm going to ask everybody for just a second to please turn to your neighbors for a second and offer them a simple, hopeful good morning. Good morning. I also know that there are people who are not able to be with us this fine morning. People who have had an impact on us. People who are essential to who we are. People we so dearly wish could be here. People who have helped deliver us to this day, but because of death or geography or some other adversity can't be here today. Let's take a moment to think about them and call them silently to our minds. Think a moment to yourself of those people. Thank you. We all stand on many shoulders to reach the heights of today, and let us not forget. It is now with great honor that I call up a rock of our Woods Charter School, Mr. Richie Temple. Thank you so much, Mr. Etherington. My beloved seniors, I have just two things for you, and it won't take me too long, so stay with me if you can. Two things to offer you this morning. The first is a story. It's a story I heard on a radio program a couple months ago, and it's not even a particularly important radio program or a particularly important story, but it has stayed on my mind and returns to my mind when I think of you seniors. Here it is. It's a true story. It's about a lady living in London who found herself in her mid-30s, working in what she describes as a gray office amidst a sea of gray cubicles. And while the work she was doing as a managerial consultant may be very fulfilling for some, it was not for her. It was, in fact, deadening for her. She says, "Conditioning just kept me there for so many years until I reached my mid-30s, and I thought, I feel like I've got a purpose in this life. And I don't know what it is, but I'm pretty certain that management consultancy is not it." So she sat down by herself one day, and she wrote out two versions of her own obituary. Two versions of her own obituary, the one that she wanted and the one that she was actually heading for. And that's not a bad exercise, is it? Maybe that should be our other item of homework for tonight. The exercise led her to what she calls a bit of a leap of logic. And she decided, of all things, to leave her gray cubicle and row a boat across the Atlantic Ocean, which is exactly not what I think about doing when I think of alternate versions of my own life. She had rowed a boat before, but otherwise had no other relevant skills whatsoever. In her words, "But I got to that dangerous stage where I thought, well, just hypothetically, supposing I was to do this, what would be on my to-do list? And so I made this enormous Excel spreadsheet, this list of all the things I would need to buy and people I would need to talk to and books I would need to read and courses I would need to take in order to make it happen." When she looked down at her detailed list, she had the realization that there wasn't actually anything on the list that she couldn't do. She says, "The whole thing started to seem rather frighteningly doable." For 14 months after going through the exercise of writing her pretend obituaries, she found herself alone and afloat on the mighty Atlantic in a rowboat. Here's what she says. "I'd wanted to get out of my comfort zone, but what I'd sort of failed to notice was that getting out of your comfort zone is by definition extremely uncomfortable. And my timing was not great either. 2005, when I did the Atlantic, was the year of Hurricane Katrina. There were more storms in the North Atlantic than ever before since records began. And pretty early on, those storms started making their presence known. All 4 of my oars broke before I reached halfway across. But what can you do? You're in the middle of the ocean. Oars are your only means of propulsion. So I just had to look around the boat and figure out what I was going to use to fix up those oars so that I could carry on. So I found a boat hook and my trusty duct tape and splintered the boat hook to the oars to reinforce it. Then when they gave out, I sawed the wheel axles off my spare rowing seat and used those. And when those gave out, I cannibalized one of the broken oars. I've never been good at fixing stuff, but it's amazing how resourceful you can become when you're in the middle of the ocean and there's only one way to get to the other side. After a couple of weeks of being abjectly terrified, you sort of get used to it. and your comfort zone expands to accommodate your new normality. And 103 days later, she successfully finished her crossing, saying it was a bit like finishing a marathon, coming out of solitary confinement, and winning an Oscar all rolled into one. I really learned that the bigger the challenge, the bigger the sense of achievement when you get to the end. So that's the first thing I want to offer you. That image of Roz Savage, that's the lady's name. Roz Savage out in the middle of the huge ocean in her little boat with 4 broken oars. Because you will be there. I can almost guarantee that you will be there. Now, some of you I know have wonderfully literal minds, I know. So at least some of you students are right now thinking to yourself, I ain't getting in no rowboat. So my hint to you is, I'm speaking metaphorically. You will find yourself in an ocean, broken. You will find yourself at a loss. And I want you to know that you need not end there or give up there. In the world beyond woods, you will find yourself facing problems larger than you can now imagine. And you can, like Roz Savage, use your resources in ways larger than you can now imagine. That brings me very naturally to the second thing I want to offer you this morning. It's a line I read in an interview in the Sun magazine. And it was an interview with the writer Barbara Kingsolver. Barbara Kingsolver is an amazing author, and I hope you have encountered some of her books. Among other things, she's one of these rare people that can work extremely artfully in fiction and nonfiction. In this interview, she was discussing parenting, and Kingsolver says she had a mantra with her kids, a sentence she repeated over and over with them as they were growing up. She repeated the mantra so much that her kids to this day, as grown adults, still find the sentence repeating in their minds and often verbalized on their lips. Now, for me, knowing some of Kingsolver's work, I was prepared for a mantra that was really deep and sophisticated, eloquent, even a bit mysterious or mystical. So I was slightly off-put when the mantra followed, and it simply read, "You can do hard things." And though I was initially let down by that, after I sat with it for a few minutes, the power of the mantra came directly to me. The message of a lot of modern parenting and modern schooling is in various forms, you are special. Now, I have no real qualms with that message. After all, it's at least true. You are special, and it's vital to your life that you realize that. But I'm not sure it serves us quite as well as Kingsolver's. You can do hard things is about effort and will. It's about evolving strength. It's about empowerment. And I hope you have heard that from us during your time at Woods. You can do hard things. And I hope you have faced some tasks that seemed overwhelming and daunting, whether that be finishing your senior project for Mrs. Berg or completing a complex lab for Mrs. Sykes, or writing an essay that will impress Nelson, or building a home in Guatemala, or helping carry your team forward in a soccer championship, or keeping your integrity alive and intact when there is pressure to compromise it. You can do hard things. And as you move beyond Woods, I hope you have this mantra in your mind as you face challenges more difficult than you can now imagine. You can do hard things. We have a little planet trying to support 7.2 billion people. You can do hard things. We have thousands of species, wondrous species, falling into the oblivion of extinction each year, faster than at any point in Earth's history. You can do hard things. We have an infinite love of fossil fuels, and yet we know well that they are a finite resource. You can do hard things. We have a garbage patch the size of Texas in the Pacific. You can do hard things. 30,000 people die each week, and most of them are kids because they don't have ready access to clean water. You can do hard things. We have almost 2.5 million people, of our own people, living in prison in this country. You can do hard things. We tolerate ugliness, yet the human spirit yearns for beauty. We live in a swarm of wars, yet the human spirit craves peace. Cynicism encircles our hearts, yet we live for hope. There are people in our lives that make it difficult to love them, yet they still need love. You can do hard things. You all can do hard things. And the implied mantra just beneath that is, we need you to do hard things. You can do hard things. We need you to do hard things. And to close, back to Angelo. Each new hour holds new chances for new beginnings. The horizon leans forward, offering you space to place new steps of change. Here on the pulse of this fine day, you may have the courage and the grace to look up and out and into your sister's eyes, into your brother's face, and say simply, very simply, with hope, good morning.